Okay, in this lecture we're going to be talking about the Vlookup function. And the Vlookup function basically looks up a given value in a list. And specifically it looks for data or a value in a vertical list as opposed to a horizontal list, in which case you would use HLOOKUP. But because of the way that we generally create lists using columns, the Vlookup function is generally a lot more valuable than the HLOOKUP. In fact, a lot of people tell me that Vlookup is their #1 favorite function in Excel. It's useful for looking up part numbers, prices, or inventory codes in any large list of numbered or coded info. And a great example would be if you have a 100-page catalog of some obscure part numbers, auto parts for example, and each one has an inventory code. You can put that in a vertical list and you can use Vlookup to find the descriptions, the prices, or any other information that you have in your chart simply by finding that inventory code. So before we dive right into learning how to use the Vlookup function, let's talk about a couple of the basic rules that you need to keep in mind while you're setting up this function. Number 1, the lookup value must be in the furthest left-hand column of the table that you're working with, or it won't work. So to keep it simple, the easiest way to do this is to put all of your inventory codes or product numbers for this example in the A column. Then you won't have to worry about it. Number 2, formatting and spacing in your lookup cells must be exact and must be correct. For example, there can't be extra spaces, blank spaces, in front of the number or behind the number. Third, in your table array reference, you want to use absolute cell values, or even better, create a table with your entire lookup array and name it, then use the name as the array reference. And the reason for this is again that you can refer to the table as your search range, but a table is dynamic. So if you want to add or delete rows from the table later, you'll still be able to find those rows using Vlookup. And if this doesn't make sense to you right now, that's fine. I will go into this as we go. So now that we have some general rules in line, let's go take a look at our sheet. And I have, of course, made a few modifications to it again. So you can see here we have our good old sales rep spreadsheet. But you can also see that I've added a few things to it again. The first thing I've added is this column A, where we have a sales rep number. And you'll notice this is in the far left-hand column. And if you remember, one of the rules for creating a Vlookup function is that the lookup value must be in the far left column of the table that you're working with. Okay, so I've added that. I've also, as you can see, I've added a number of new sales reps, and that's just to make this a little bit more dynamic so we have more options to search in our Vlookup function. And then I've added this section down here, and this is where we're going to actually create our Vlookup function and be able to enter different sales reps IDs and come back with their rep name and their total monthly pay using a couple of different Vlookup functions. So the first thing we need to do before we enter our Vlookup function is we need to create a table out of this chart. And this is actually relatively simple. We just need to highlight the entire section. I'm going to go ahead and leave off that bonus because it's really not relevant to what we're searching for in here. And then we're going to go over here to Format as Table. Just click this drop down and you can see it's just giving us a ton of different table styles that we can choose from. And I'm just going to pick the simplest one right here because it actually happens to match the formatting I already have going. Just click that. And then we get this important pop-up that's asking us, where is the data for your table? Well, I've already selected it here and it's already populated it in this field. So I don't need to do anything more with that. And then this is an important question too. My table has headers. And as you can see, my table does have these headers, the sales rep numbers, sales rep, monthly commissions, etc. And I don't want it to include those as part of the search data, but it is going to use those, as you'll see in a second, as part of the table. So I'm going to leave that checked. If I didn't have headers, then I would just uncheck this. But I'm going to leave it checked. I'm going to click OK. and it creates my table. And I'll click off of this so you can see. So it's done two really cool things. First, it's formatted my data, just a simple formatting, right, with these nice bars, but this makes it easy to track across rows. And so if I want to see where Casey's numbers are, it's easy to just track across this blue-gray here to see what's going on. But also, it's created these awesome little sortable drop-downs. And if I click this, you'll see it has some really great options. Sort smallest to largest, largest to smallest, sort by color. It has a bunch of filters. And we're not going to go into tables in this lecture, but just know that tables can be very powerful for sorting your information. Okay, so I'm going to close out of that. And then one last very important thing we need to do with our table is we need to name it. To name it, all you do is click inside the table anywhere, go up to Table Tools here, and you click on Design, and you'll see over here there's a table name. So I'm going to highlight this, and I'm going to rename this from Table 2 to Sales R, just short for Sales Rep. And then be sure to hit Enter to save that. Then if I click off of this, you'll see it just goes back to the Home tab. But if I click back in my table, it goes back to the design and it shows my table name in here. That's important because we're going to use that later in our Vlookup function to refer to this entire table as our data. So let's go ahead and create a Vlookup function. This first column is where we're going to be entering our sales rep ID to bring up the results in these two cells. So we're going to go straight to this cell, which is where we're going to actually enter our Vlookup function. And of course we start with our equal sign. And I was playing with Vlookup before, so it's sitting right here. So I'll just use it right out of the drop down. And there's our function arguments box. And you can see we have 4 function arguments for the Vlookup function. So obviously it's a little more complex than our good old sum formula, but by now you've created enough formulas, and we'll go through this nice and slowly, so this will be totally achievable for you. So the first argument here is our lookup value. And again, the lookup value is going to be a value that we're pulling from the first column of the table, which is our sales rep ID number. You can see I just titled this one sales rep ID as well. And so this is where we're going to be entering one of these numbers to bring back these results. So I'm just going to click on that, and we're done with that one. Then we go to our table array, and our table array again is our table. So we could either select a whole group of cells here if we hadn't already created a table, or we can type in sales R, which is the name of our title, or we can just click and drag and select our table, and notice it's just identifying it as the name of the table. Then we have our column index number, and this can sometimes be a little bit confusing the first couple of times you look at it, but once you get used to it, it's no problem, and I'll explain it. We're just entering the number of the column that we want to get the data back from. So if you look at these, instead of being A, B, C, D, E, F, G, we just change this to a number. So this would be column 1, column 2, column 3, column 4, column 5, and column 6 in this particular table. So in this case, we're looking to get the rep name. We're entering the sales rep ID number, and in this Vlookup function, we want it to bring back the rep name. So we're going to look for column B, and the number for that is 2, because we have 1, 2. So we're just going to type in 2, and that's all we need for that. And the range lookup, you just have 2 choices here, true or false. And you're almost always going to use false. So I'm just going to type that in here. Basically what range lookup is asking is, do you want Excel to find the closest match to what you've entered? And if we type true in here, then Excel will find the closest match. And sometimes it's not really what we're looking for. And sometimes if you type true in, Excel will bring back some kind of screwy results. And there are a few rare instances where you would want to use this, but for the most part, you want Excel to bring back an exact match for what you're looking for, so you don't get any of those screwy results. So we put in false, and it's going to bring back only exact matches for our inquiry. So we click OK, and then you'll see it says NA here. And that's okay because we haven't entered anything in here yet for it to do a Vlookup function. So let's go to this section, and we'll type in the number 2. Hit enter, and you'll see When we type in number 2, it goes and searches in this column and finds Carol. So that VLOOKUP has been successful. Now let's create one for our total monthly pay, because what we want to do now is when we type in 2, we want to bring back Carol and her total monthly pay. So we'll type our equal sign again, go to VLOOKUP, go to our lookup value, which again is going to be right here, our table array. I'll just type in sales R, and you can always check over here to make sure that it's correct. You'll notice it's starting to list everything in the table. So 1, Joe, $2,000, no, etc. So that's how I know that I've typed this in correctly. If I don't type it in correctly, if I just typed sales, then it wouldn't be pulling from my table. So I'd have to make sure that I get it typed in correctly, and there we go. Then we have our column index number, and again, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is the numbers of our columns. And we're looking for their monthly pay here. So we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Column number 5. And then our range lookup again. We don't want any screwy answers or guessing answers from Excel. So we're going to say false. Then we click OK. And there we go. So for sales rep number 2, it's Carol, and her monthly pay is $2,000. Let's go ahead and put in a couple other ones and make sure it's working. Sales rep 4, and sales rep 4 is Bob, and he made $2,800. Let's put in sales rep 8. Sales rep 8 is Robert, and he made $2,600. So our VLOOKUP is working. So I know we've covered a lot in this lecture, but the important things to remember are, number 1, always put your lookup value in the farthest left-hand column in order to make VLOOKUP work. Highlight your entire spreadsheet that you want to use in your VLOOKUP function and format it as a table by clicking up here. Remember to click in your table and click Design and name your table so that you can enter that into your function arguments for your VLOOKUP. And then finally, remember that your column index number is just counting the columns from left to right. So column A is 1, B is 2, C is 3, and so on. So that's how you use VLOOKUP to pull data out of a vertical list.